Hello. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to Archetype, sponsored by Lenovo and AMD. I am your host, Ashley. How's it going? Yeah, let's get into it. So like I said last time, because so much of this character's cloth and sculpting and all that has to do with his pose, I went ahead and posed him. And then we're going to go ahead and add fur and a bunch of other of the long fur and stuff, and then we'll cloth sim some of his clothes and just start bringing those details up to speed. If you're in the chat, say hello as usual. I like seeing everybody. Hello Ash, hello Poddle. See Twitch and YouTube already. Thanks for joining me. Go ahead and, work on your own sculpts and hang out with me as we just kind of chill on a Tuesday afternoon or maybe Tuesday night, depending on where you are. Again, I have this body here, which is still split up into a bunch of parts, but what I'll do now is I'll start adding some basic fur shapes to it, and then we'll start using my goal today, I think, is mainly to probably work on getting all the fur looking good, just because I think the rest of him, it's not selling for me personally as a sculpt yet until we start making the differentiation between what is skin and like what is, covered in fur. So I really want to make sure that today we kind of set ourselves up for that and see how far we can get with that. Because I think that'll start bringing the sculpt to life, especially with our reference. So much of it is fur shapes. So I want to really tune into that today. So we'll see how it goes. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this model. I'm going to duplicate it, and then I'm going to get rid of anything that isn't fur. So I'll get rid of this guy, go down to a lower subdivision here. Get rid of the hands and feet. So this is a good form, just as like a base. Our main musculature that we'll keep, but I'm going to go ahead and delete higher and delete lower. And then I'm also going to delete hidden. And then I'm going to go into Dynamesh now, and I'll run a Dynamesh on it. And you can keep groups on or you can turn them off. I think for now it doesn't really matter. I might merge them later so I can make sure that they stick, but oh my gosh, 4:54 a.m. in Nepal? And you're on stream? Welcome. 5 in the morning. You're my new favorite viewer. Oh my goodness. The dedication. I love it. Oh, there's a thumb. Thanks. Thank you there. Hidden man behind the camera. Fake with the camera in quotations. Cool. Now we got that. What I'll do is I'll turn back everything on. I'll go into transparency. I'm going to go to deformation, and then I'm going to deflate this into the skin a little bit, and you can see that if I zoom in here, you can see you get just that slight thickness. That's kind of what you want, because I only want the hair to poke out of the form, so this is the easiest way for me to kind of control what is form versus what is fur. And later, if we wanted to like combine it or do something, we can. For now, this is just a sculpt, so I'm not too worried about, making this super perfect. But yeah, you just want to inflate it just a little bit. So that way what we see now is our ZBrush, but then on the inside is our Dynamesh. And then we can start adding some basic fur here. So to do that, I'm going to start with the snake hook brush. And it always says it's best with Sculptress. I'm just going to ignore that. And just skip that. And then I'm going to change the alpha to be something a little more organic. And then I can start pulling and pushing this guy. If I start pulling out, you can see now I can start to get some hair. The biggest thing though is I don't want any color. I just want to pull out hair. with the color that was already there. So I can start pushing and pulling this stuff around. And that's going to be a dog barking. Very exciting. I'm getting a lot of lag for some reason. And this isn't, it's not that this is heavy. Oh, hello, puppy that was barking. You're going to hear barking puppies a little bit today. No dynamic was turned on, so not sure why it's being kind of laggy, but that's okay. But yeah, I'm just going to start pulling out. And the snake hook brush is very much dependent on your camera angle onto how you're pulling stuff out. So if you want to stick out a little more, you know, if I pull from here, I can pull out that way. But if I want something a bit more stand-up-ish, then you kind of got to lay a little bit flatter to the surface that you're sculpting on. It takes some getting used to, but you'll totally get used to it as you sculpt into it. And this is just a base. And then later I can smooth out certain areas where maybe I want more control later on with where that fur is going to be. But for now, this is just kind of a good start. And it doesn't have to be everywhere, you know? It just has to be in places where you're going to get the most profiling of your hair. You know, so like the top of the shoulder, you'd get probably a decent amount. There's actually not a lot of hair kind of up onto the back sometimes when you look at, you know, real world reference of orangutans. So just kind of depends. I think it's good to be a little more choiceful with these sections. Than to just like sporadically put fur everywhere. Like I might not add a whole lot to the back, maybe just a little bit of areas, you know, that I can sculpt onto later. This is really, again, like I said, just a base point. When it comes to finalizing these sculpts and things, sculpting hair is just one of those things that it just takes time. The secret to anything, like usual, is time. So I'm going to start making this go into the different direction. Right, so it was first, you know, moving forward, and then now it's slowly kind of going straight up, and then it's going to move back into the back. I like this method of sculpting fur because I can keep the main musculature volume underneath there while starting to block out fur. And I'm not, you know, ruining my initial sculpt because, you know, if I don't like this or if there's changes later that I want to make, I'm okay with just, you know, erasing it or smoothing it out and not having to worry about it messing up my musculature that you work on. So I think that's a really good benefit to having this kind of workflow. So I'm going to start pulling this down by a lot to start getting and blocking out that main fur shape that we have here. We can start moving this down a little bit. Oops, sorry. There's going to be a barking dog. Why are you so noisy? Yeah, so we can start pulling all this stuff down. And in reality, this is just like a base. Because what we'll do is I'm going to take this and then I'll draw on top of it the more refined curves. So this is just a fine the block in of this basically, and just get the overall shape feeling right first. Because if you were to draw out hair curves on this the whole time for every single little, you know, fur brush, that would be a lot of work. So we don't need to do that. Oops, I think that's the wrong brush. Go. And this is again stuff that I can either keep later or I can choose to, you know, refine it with adding some more brushes on top. But I just want to kind of get an idea of layering. You know, for a sculpt, if you're going to like print this or do whatever, and let's say it's really small, you know, I've printed hair that looks just like this on models and stuff before, and like that sells for pretty well. Sometimes you don't have to go super crazy with it. It's always nice to go in there and like sculpt stuff, you know, by hand a little bit. But you don't have to go crazy, especially if you're just sculpting. Do the same thing to the other side, so I'm going to start pulling all this stuff down. This is where I can also figure out where hair is going to kind of wrap around objects, such as his pants. Pull all this stuff down. Sorry if you hear my dogs in the background. I'm by myself today, having to watch them, so they're preoccupied with a bone. So if you hear some munching in the background, just know it's cute puppies chewing on stuff. So I can pull this stuff out. Oh wait, this might have. I can mask this. Probably don't even need that, do we? Because we're not going to be doing any further anyway, so I can just grab that. I'll grab his legs, just so that way we don't get a. It's not too distracting, and you run into stuff. You can just delete it, right? And then I'm just going to keep the ones on his feet here. And pull that out. So again, I'm just thinking about fur directionality. Looking at reference is always really helpful in order for you to figure out which way fur or hair goes. And then thinking about gravity and how this would, you know, bunch up and then kind of droop down. I really want to make sure I kind of get that in there. And then in my reference, I have his hair so long that it actually touches the ground, so I like that. So I want to make sure that, you know, I can look at my plane here is where he'd be sitting, and I can pull all this down. And then I can sculpt this later, kind of on the ground, which means this could probably be a little longer and stuff too. So really want to exaggerate. And I can, because the Dynamesh is also separate, I can pull that hair all the way into the armpit without worrying about it kind of crashing with the chest or anything, which is nice. I can probably cut this off at the very base, and then I could sculpt outward or I can just start, you know, snake hooking this out. And I can cut off the bottom of it later, so I can pull this out like that. Just to get a basic shape, right? And then I can kind of curl this down, move this around. We could even, because it's Dynamesh, you know, I could inflate this a little bit. And then from the bottom, I can flatten it a little bit using the polish brush. So that it really sits hopefully flat. We'll also use the curve tool, you know, to help us later as well. Sculpt that down. Flatten it out a little bit. I just need a basic shape there so that way I can draw out brushes from there. And we'll see how much I keep of just the sculpt versus completely, you know, drawing over stuff with the curve tool for some hair. Probably going to be a good blend of both. When we might need to up the resolution a little bit on our Dynamesh here. And later, you know, if we have like kind of a block in like this now, it's a good way to get a group of stuff. But if we wanted to, we could go to more like the square alpha, maybe. And we can kind of pull this out and we'll get like bigger square chunks. Especially I think if we lower this focal shift. And we'll kind of get a more interesting style getting pulled out by doing that rather than just like pointy bits. That's a good way to just get some variation to begin with on your model. Boko on Twitch, hello. Franco watching from Brazil. Adam, hello. How's it going? Again, we'll see how much of this volume we keep, so. Using the snake hook with different alphas, you'll get a huge variety of shapes. Also, if you want his hair to be like fluffier rather than so pointy, you can also just kind of inflate this and you'll get kind of a thicker volumed fur, which also works. And then if you wanted to, there's a lot of like weird little things to play with, like flattening this out maybe a little bit from the top. I definitely want his hair to feel messy because he's just kind of like old scraggly orangutan. So we'll see. Adam is asking, wants to get my input on which tablet to get if you want to work with 3D modeling and use for the Intro to Maya Gnomon course and have it with you for a while. So if you want to travel with a tablet. You know, there's multiple options for screen tablets. You can have a screen tablet like I have, which I don't know if you can see, but it's like, you know, an actual screen that I'm drawing on. And this is the Huion 16-inch Pro. Now, this isn't as friendly to carry with you. I mean, it's 16 inches, so, you know, I mean, it's a little bit longer than like an iPad, but it's about as high as an iPad. But maybe it's like an iPad and a half long. So it's a decent size to carry with you. Another option for 3D modeling with a tablet is you can just get like a normal tablet that's not the screen one. And you'll get, you know, you can use like Intuos, you know, Wacom has some, Huion has some, XP Pen I believe has some as well. I've switched over from Wacom now to Huion, but that's just a personal preference. I've had a lot of trouble with Wacom's drivers or Wacom's drivers in the past, and I just wanted to give something new a shot. And so far, I really like the Huion tablet. This isn't sponsored by them or anything. I just bought this and I seem to like it, so just giving you my honest opinion. But you know, it kind of depends. If you're going to be traveling a lot to Gnomon, I would probably suggest to start with, if you're just doing intro stuff, start with one of the cheaper tablets. You know, Wacom makes one that I have. I forget what it's called. I had the box somewhere, but it's a really small one. And it's like this big, super tiny. And it's super easy to carry with you. And I use that I go teach at Gnomon. I go teach the intro to ZBrush class, and I use that when I teach, just because it fits in my backpack and it's super easy and portable. But at home, I have my, you know, my nicer setup now. But for years, I just used, you know, a simple, you know, Intuos or something like that. It's really just personal preference. But yeah, to begin with, I would just start with a cheaper tablet, and then depending on what you like and feeling your workflow, then you can kind of upgrade. Don't go full ham. And the most expensive doesn't mean better. I used to have a 24-inch Cintiq, so it was the really, really big one. And I hated how much space it took. It took a lot of space, and it was just huge, and I realized I wasn't using the whole screen. So it just actually became like a waste of money for me. You know, and that's like a $1,500 difference that I wasted back in the day, because I just got tired of using it and I didn't use it. And I would just use my Intuos tablet. That's like $100 or whatever. So, you know, start small, figure it out, and do what's right for you. And then someone on Twitch asked how I was sculpting the fur separate from the main mesh body. And that was something that I covered in the beginning. Is I duplicated my mesh, turned it into a Dynamesh, and then I shrink it into the model. So you can see in transparency mode, it's sitting within the actual normal sculpt. And then I'm using the snake hook brush to pull it out. And then I can re-Dynamesh it to get detail. That's how I'm doing that. Yeah, the Huion is not super. I'm actually jealous that you see that it's on sale now. I don't think when I bought it just a few weeks ago it was. Maybe a month ago now. It's been like a month or so. Yeah, I think for the price point, I think it's a really nice tablet. I've been really enjoying sculpting on it. I feel like I'm actually drawing again, kind of on my tablet. But again, it's totally personal preference as to what you're comfortable with, you know? Definitely before, you know, spending a bunch of money. If you're going to go to Gnomon, you can always try out their tablets first and see if you even like them. I wish there was like a trial, a way you could test them and stuff, because then I would have realized that 24-inch for me is just way too big. But anything smaller than a 16 I don't like, because usually 3D programs have pretty big interfaces. You can usually change the button size on some of them, but sometimes the buttons are really hard to push if it's any smaller than like a 16 inch. So, you know, keep that in mind too when it comes to size. That's why I love the iPad, and drawing on the iPad's great because Procreate has almost no interface. So it really just feels like you're drawing in a sketchbook. It's just like a digital sketchbook, which is really nice. So unfortunately, our tools can be expensive in this industry to like play with stuff, but it is what it is. But again, I use a normal Intuos, which costs like a few $100, and the one that I teach at Gnomon still is only like $50. You can get one for $100 that's a wireless version, but it doesn't matter. And they're so cheap that if they break, it's like, $50, whatever. You just buy another one. And the placement pens are way cheaper, and stuff like that. I'm going to continually save because I crashed all my stuff last time, so I keep doing that. Tech is asking about the resolution. Mine's the 2.5K. If you're going to go smaller, having more pixels is always better. The 2.5K is great. It's very similar to, again, the iPad is also like a 2.5K. It's basically almost the same screen resolution as drawing on the iPad. 1080p is just a little too low res for me when it comes to, again, it's all about pushing those tiny buttons and stuff. If you want clarity on those buttons and clarity while you're sculpting on something that's slightly smaller than a normal screen, then yeah, you want that 2.5K. And also think about it, you know, if you're going to be spending the money, if you choose to spend the money on that stuff, have the one that's going to be, what do they call it, future-proofed, right? So the 1080p, you're probably just not going to be as happy with it later on down the line, especially as things get more and more 4K and all that stuff. So kind of future-proofing your buy is never really a bad idea. It's the same thing when I felt about the iPad. I just bought the bigger drive space because, you know, later on when you're using this thing for years, you're going to be glad that you did. And that's kind of how I think about it. You know, my tablet costs $500, but I'll be using it for years. So even if you use it for 2 years, it's like $1 a day, right? So it really becomes not as expensive as you think. It seems expensive, but for how much you use it, I mean, I use mine every day, and for how many years I'll be using it for, pretty worth the price. So just stuff to think about. I think we're getting there on the shapes for now. I think that's feeling pretty good. I might smooth all this out and do it by hand. I'm not really sure yet, but I'm gonna do the arms and stuff first and see how I like that style, and then go from there. Oh yeah, Boko on Twitch says that he always damages the skin top when trying to sculpt fur, and yeah, that's the exact reason why I do it, is because you do all this work sculpting the anatomy, and you don't want to ruin that by just sculpting fur on top of it. So this is my way of being able to see the anatomical structure while sculpting on top, and you can see it's pretty seamless. Like, as long as it's the same color, you kind of can't tell. So I like to poly paint my stuff first before doing this. Because then the poly paint pretty much goes with whatever it is that you're sculpting. So, right, so I'm gonna select this dude just because it has no subdivisions. This little pole. Whoops, let's keep that one selected. And I'm gonna go to my, I have my insert mesh hairbrush, and I have this one that's kind of squared off, because in my reference or in my drawing, all of his fur is kind of squared off, which I like, so I want to keep that. So now I can draw this on. And I think it's always flipped. So I can go to my modifiers and turn on size, and I can flip this, and I can make this a little, see what that does? Yeah. So I want a little bit of tapering, right, on our mesh. I think that'll be good. So I'm going to back out of that so I can draw that again. Make sure it's the same color. And then once I have one placed somewhere, you know, roughly, can split this off. There we go. You can ask questions all day long, Adam. So Adam from YouTube is also asking, do I recommend the pen display tablet or just the drawing tablet? I use now the display tablet. I like it more because, again, when you use just a drawing tablet, you have the disconnect from your eye. So you are looking at a screen, but you're drawing, you know, down here. And for most artists that are used to like traditional drawing, that's a huge pain in the butt, and it's kind of like a big learning curve. I mean, quite honest, I've been drawing for years digitally. And I've never really gotten used to it. It's really hard for me to have that disconnect. So, I mean, I can do it for sculpting, which is weird, but for drawing, if you're gonna draw, I struggle on drawing on like an Intuos or something, just because I'm really not used to that eye disconnect, because I come from such a traditional drawing background. So yeah, it's really personal preference. I think it's a lot easier to draw on pen tablets. Sculpting, I like sculpting on display tablets as well. But again, it also comes down to your budget and things like that too. Because you might not be able to afford a display tablet at the moment, but later on in your career, I think it's definitely worth the upgrade at some point. It's gonna feel more natural for the most part. But you know, I know plenty of sculptors, I know plenty of artists who do just fine drawing on the traditional, just, you know, drawing tablet, but it really just comes down to personal preference. So. If you want to draw bigger, but I'm losing resolution, you can lower this curve step. Draw it out again, you should get slightly more resolution. I want like big pieces first. And then I'm just grabbing and moving. Hair is really interesting because it's always hair takes time to block out. But once you get like a decent block out, you know, I won't go in there and move every single one on the fly immediately. I'm just gonna get, you know, that first bottom layer. I want to make sure that I have varying thicknesses and whatnot. Another helpful tool is to make sure instead of constant, you can say 1C, just in case, so that way, you know, if I have this pole that's really close, it might snap to the pole, but I don't want it to do that, so I can 1C it, and then I can pull it back in. And it's basically just picking the Z-axis once, so it's easier to pull out hair. So if I want hair to fall and overlap easier, I can do that, and you can see that it sticks out based on that Z-plane, and then I can pull it down. So it's just a little easier to deal with. And I don't have to worry about it snapping to stuff that I don't want it to. Let the puppy break. Oh my goodness. And I like this method of putting fur in just because it feels like it has more control. And yeah, I mean, this is the secret, guys. It's just, you know, one strand at a time. Obviously, for stylized stuff, I'm not doing one actual literal strand at a time. I'm picking, you know, to put in chunks at a time. That actually felt pretty well. And then I'll be sculpting stuff here as well to kind of blend between all that. But I want to block in the initial fur first. And then later I'll sculpt on top of that as well. Get some like line variation and things like that. You can create a bunch of different, you know, insert meshes that have maybe a little beveled segment on the side and things like that. So you can also insert segment points like that if you want to. I just like to usually sculpt on top of it later. It's just as easy to, and I can show you how to do that pretty cleanly as well without, you know, losing your nice resolution of your meshes. And I have it where the I have lock start on, so when I move the start, the whole piece moves. And then anything else that I move is just can curl and kind of form into that. So it's just easier this way to work this way, so that way I can kind of push and manipulate stuff without worrying about the starting point of the fur and where the hair is. So that's probably a good little trick. I'm curious if adding some like varying strands in there. I think that would be like thinner though. Yeah, something like that. Might be getting too, that might be too detailed of a piece for now, but and we'll see how far up, you know, this stuff goes. I can always push this in and do things later with it. But I think for now that looks pretty cool. And then once I poly paint it too, that'll change a lot. Now I can start drawing on top of these. So today's a pretty chill day. We'll see how far we can get in the fur. Because again, the fur is like such a main priority of the pose and the piece that I really want to spend some time making it feel right. This is maybe now where Constant Z can be turned on because I want to overlay on top of stuff that's already there. So now I can go in and kind of start messing that. It's just all about adding small shapes on top of big shapes and adding that variance. You can add small flat shapes on top of that. Another puppy, hello. They're upset because I haven't been able to take them for a walk today, and they're quite sad. So you might hear some whining. They're just like, Mom, take us for a walk. Pay attention to us. And see, this is what I'm talking about though. Constant Z versus 1C is if I'm overlapping that pole, it's not helpful. So I can go and once again, I can choose 1C and make sure that I'm overlapping, and then I'll get an easier curve to manipulate. The other thing too is you don't have to place these by hand if you don't want to. About to order the Huon 16. Awesome. Too bad I'm not sponsored. Maybe I'd be getting some royalties or something. What a shame. Comes with a free backpack. That sounds fancy. I probably didn't need. I have a backpack from my company, so probably didn't even do backpacks. So that's cool. That's awesome. I guess you have to let me know how you like it. And if you don't like it, don't blame me. It's personal preference, but I'm sure you'll love it. Make that a little thinner. You you don't have to, like I was saying, you don't have to hand place these. Most of the time it's easier not to, but because we're really just dealing with fur that is just drawing downwards, right? We're just dealing with gravity. This really isn't that difficult to just kind of hand place, but when you're thinking about like fur that's overlapping, it's easier just to draw one section or layer, duplicate it, and then you can move it around that way. But in our case, this is pretty straightforward, you know? And then I can hide this pole also for now, so I can look at the side here. I mean, I was spending a lot of time on the back, but now that you really think about it, we're not really looking at the back, are we? That's okay. So I'm gonna draw this down. Big shapes first. And I can adjust later, because they're all separate meshes as well, and they're super low res, it'll be easier for me to move that stuff along. With like the move topological brush later, or whatever it is. So, you know, placing them, it's important to place them correctly, but you can always change it also later. So don't feel too married to the curve brush process. I just try to get a general, this feels about right. And then as long as it feels like that, I'm usually pretty happy. So hopefully this is helpful for you guys. I feel like every student that I have usually asks about hair. So it's just one of those constant battles that we always have. How to do fur. Sculpting is the easiest method. Obviously, you know, for film or for game, we would be, sometimes it's sculpted for game, but a lot of times there's also, you know, hair cards and things like that. So hair cards are a whole nother beast, a whole nother animal to deal with. So, and then also doing something like XGen, you know, is super different as well, where it's real time for simulations, you know, for stuff like live action Lion King and whatnot. So sculpting fur is the most fun. Sometimes it'll always be the most, it can be just as tedious as all the other options, but I've always really liked the result, and I like the process more, for sure. Yeah, see, now we're getting also a thickness, which is really fun. That one's a little too similar to all the others, so maybe a thick one. Or maybe a thin. I think these thin ones later on are going to really sell. Overlap. I can move this around now a little bit, so I can move this forward a little bit more. And use topological to kind of push these upward into his forearm a bit more. And again, I can use these to lengthen or to shorten, pull these up and down, and kind of create the volume that I want. You know, if I wanted to, I could also start moving certain of them out back and forth to create even more depth rather than just constantly brushing on. But again, it's just as easy to brush on in this scenario because we're only using gravity. Fun with fur. Hi, 88 Scrolls. 88 Scrolls asking, what social media do I post on? I post on Instagram. And that is the only one I have. I have Facebook for family. But yeah, you can find me on my socials. And yes, it is at Stegon Eggs. And I hope you all enjoy the pun, because I do, so. If I could probably make every character just a character pun, I probably would. Big fan of puns. But yeah, Steak and Eggs that I post, I try to be good about posting the progress for the stream. I also just have drawings and stuff, and I have a lot of posts. I don't know if I should clear them, but I used to keep Instagram as a kind of like a daily progress journal when I first started it. So it really wasn't about, and it still isn't, it's not about finding followers or gaining, notoriety on Instagram. It was a way for me to keep track of my own progress as an artist, especially when I was going to school, because I didn't want to stop drawing, because a lot of people, when they take up 3D, don't know how to divvy the time between, sculpting and drawing and doing all these things. And so I kept an Instagram in the beginning just to post a sketch daily to make sure that I was, continuing to draw and honing that craft, along with, learning 3D stuff. So that's what it started as. Start overlapping onto the bicep here. That's how I recommend using social media. It's a great way to be inspired by artists, but don't compare yourself to anybody on there. There was a thing back in the day that was like, speed paintings on YouTube, and that destroyed a bunch of artists because they would think they would have to make a painting in less than an hour or something, and it didn't let you, you never saw the progress, you just saw that finished result. So, remember that, don't compare yourself to anything that you see online. Also try not to listen to, people saying like, this took me an hour. Like, it doesn't matter. Being fast is good, for industry stuff, but being fast is not about being actually fast. It's about being efficient. And the only way you get to be efficient is just by knowing the tools that you're working with, It's just those XP points in the tool that you're using. That's all it is. It's just time and tools. I was gonna use an acronym for that, but that wasn't an appropriate acronym. Oh, I like that though. Dang it. But yeah, so it's just all about you spending time in it and realizing what makes you an efficient artist, not what makes you an actual fast artist. Yeah, the classic, just a quick sketch, my favorite, right? Just a quick sketch. I say just a quick sketch sometimes on there, and when I really think about it, I'm like, man, that sketch took me like 3 hours. That's not quick. That's some time, dedicated in my morning to draw on a beetle or something, whatever it is. The internet lies to you. Who would have thought? Not me, though. I won't lie to you. I'll be good. I would never lie to my fans. So just trying to start to overlap it onto the arm here. That's pretty good. Now, I think there's obviously a few more areas that I could manipulate, but again, I can always, you can do one or two things. You can grab this. I don't need these polygroups. It's better to probably just do an auto group on that, and then I can go in here and grab these, and I can hit control, and I can move these over. I can thin them out. I can push them down, and while they're masked, I can, move them around a little bit if I want. Create that variance. And again, because they're all separate, I can use that move topological, and anything that seems a little weird or maybe not falling correctly or something, I can kind of go in here by hand and place these things and find, you know, these happy mediums and try to maybe get some more depth onto these. Sink these in. You know, the forearm one's going to be rolling a certain way versus the hair that's coming from the bicep area, which I'll sculpt some more fur on top of, you know, or we can pull these out a little more. Again, it's all about getting some depth. And it's not that we can't use that inner sculpt here, right? You know, now that we have this, if I take this and add a little bit more detail to the bottom of this, using that alpha, I can pull this down just to the bottom, just adding like some, you can pull it up. Boop, 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 boop. You know, you're just going to get that little bit of variance in there, which maybe it could be too much noise or not enough noise. It kind of depends on what you're doing. But I'll probably take that and move that up a little bit and hide it a little bit, but it's just there to add some volume and then to also blend between the two. This took me forever. I love that. Oh, you can't find me on Instagram? You can post, I have a background buddy who might be able to slide it up into the chat, but it's at Stegon Eggs. It's just all one word, no caps. Martinez on YouTube is asking, do I make work for 3D printing? And yes, my background, for those of you guys who are new to the stream, I used to work at Legacy Effects. So Legacy Effects used to be Stan Winston's studio, and they made the original Jurassic Park animatronics. They made the Alien Queen. They did some Predator stuff. Terminator, classic. And yeah, so that's all practical effects, and they still do it to this day. So I've worked on shows like The Mandalorian and Pacific Rim, and a bunch of game commercials like the Destiny commercial. Worked on Shape of Water, some Marvel movies, all that good jazz. And it was all for, you know, prosthetics such as like Guardians of the Galaxy, and doing like, you know, Drax prosthetics, or, you know, Suicide Squad. We did a lot of prosthetics for that show too. James Gunn is a big fan of us, which is very cool. I say us, but I'm not part of the studio anymore, but we're family. It's important. But yeah, so my background was all about sculpting stuff for 3D printing. Yeah, Stegon, like Stegosaurus. So Adam says I should have my own channel. I appreciate that. This is kind of my channel. I get to do whatever I want on this channel. I control the stream. That is something that has been discussed in the past, but we'll see. I'm going to start on the other arm now here. Except I'm going to split it away so I don't have a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to split this one into separate. But yeah, so I used to work in practical effects exclusively. So my background was digital sculpting and 3D modeling, which then gets sent to the printer, depending on the size. You know, we mill it out of foam, or you know, cast it and print a resin one, or all sorts of materials for that. And then we mold it and cast it, and then that gets painted. And then that gets thrown onto a suit of armor, or, you know, helmet for, you know, your Mandalorian friends, or turns into silicone for like Asuka's, you know, weird horn things that she has. I don't even know what they call them. They call them horns, but they're not really horns. I'm not entirely sure what they are. And then I also worked on stuff like Sideshow Collectibles. So that was just strictly maquette making, which is really similar to what I do on this stream. You know, I'm not making game assets. These are just kind of fun posed sculpts, because it's easier to do this type of work on a stream than it is to show like an entire game pipeline, which I would do. I just don't know if anybody wants to watch me do that. making the high res and, you know, sculpting is the most fun part of everything. But that was my background. Initially was in 3D printing and maquette making, and then now I work in video games as a character artist. I'm a senior character artist at Cold Iron, working on some alien game. So I'm really just a Xenomorph master at this point. That's really what my title should be. So yeah, I have game knowledge and 3D printing knowledge. So if you guys have any questions on that, you guys are more than welcome to ask in the chat. Do not be afraid to ask questions. It's me and puppies and my sculpting abilities. So ask away. And some chill background music. So can't forget that. All right, I'm going to pull this out now. You can see it's a lot easier to get curves that will look like they're sitting flat on a surface than sculpting it. Oh, sign up for my Gnomon class. Yeah, that'll be awesome. Yeah, I teach at Gnomon. It's nice to go on campus. It's very cool. I love teaching there. I have some awesome students, and student work's always really fun. Get tons of fun variety and things. So yeah, if you want to learn ZBrush, that's always a really great way. There's tons of cool tutorials. Obviously, this stream I try to, you know, help where people have questions about how I'm doing or approaching a certain thing. But it's, you know, it's not a class. I try my best to help, but at the end of the day, if you don't know ZBrush, then it might be a little confusing as to what I'm doing or, you know, the methods I'm using to do stuff. That's totally fine. But yeah, I could see that being a little confusing. I'm gonna make this go the other way with a little bit of contrast. ZBrush is a weird one to learn. You know, Blender and all the other 3D programs seem to have a kind of common language of like, this makes sense, right? You know, for an interface. And ZBrush is like, let's just ignore all that. And they have a very confusing interface, unfortunately. But it's because of its history of being 2.5D initially, and then it turned into a 3D program. But it is the best at handling those awesome polygons that you need. You know, you can throw 20 million polygons into ZBrush and it will yawn. I've had maquettes that I did for Sideshow that were up to 120 million polygons total. So yeah, you can go pretty crazy with ZBrush and polygons. And I also use it for hard surfacing. I use it for retop as well. I'm a little crazy though. Most people shouldn't use it for that. Most people don't, but I like just staying in one program. It's part of my efficiency process of just, you know, I don't like importing and exporting a bunch of objects and stuff like that. So I keep it pretty simple by just staying in one program. Martinez on YouTube is asking about perspective in ZBrush, and if I'm working for 3D printing, what is the right way to set perspective? So ZBrush will lie to you. It's one thing I tell my students all the time, is the camera in ZBrush is not really a real camera. And part of that is because it has that 2.5D. So if you were to build like an environment in ZBrush and you wanted to like fly through something, you can't. So if I was to try to get in between, you know, his feet, if I zoom in here and try to go in between his feet, I never will. His feet will always be in front of the camera because it's not really a real camera that you can like fly through this world. How'd that get up there? That's funny. Looks like he's got floating feathers. So it's not a real camera. So it's really important to, I mean, you can turn on this dynamic perspective. It's fine, but it's not entirely super accurate. The biggest thing when it comes to 3D printing that you should be very aware of is your silhouette balance. You know, if you're printing something that's not just sitting, you know, you want to make sure that it's a balanced character. So it's always good to do little test prints first and like place it and see if you need, you know, to balance that character more, have better support in places. The other thing is obviously scale. Scale plays a huge part into how you make keys and how you cut up your model to fit on a printing bed and things like that. So more so than perspective being important, I would say, you know, making sure that your workflow for printing the correct scale and stuff is probably more important when it comes to the 3D printing process. Because ZBrush's perspective isn't really a real one. It's better to look at and preview that stuff in something like Marmoset or something in like Maya or an engine, a game engine or something. Marmoset would probably be the easiest one because it's easier to bring stuff in and out. But yeah, the bigger thing is about scale. You know, if you're printing for something like miniatures, your scale is going to be very different to get the same sort of detail. For real scale stuff, you know, a belt might be a certain type of thickness, but to get that belt to read on something that's like a miniature, it might have to be like 3 times as thick. So it's weird things like that about sculpting for a certain particular scale that has a bit of a learning curve to it. Hi, Foxbray, up here for the monkey. Let's go. Ooh, I have not touched Houdini yet. I see 88 Scrolls is talking about Houdini. It's always one I've wanted to pick up, but it looks so scary. It's such a big learning curve. Maybe one day I'll have someone teach it to me. Or I'll take a Gnomon class. I'm allowed to take some classes at Gnomon, so I should jump on that, but we'll see. That's a little bit too awkward of a... I'm going to move this up. It's a little too... It's not long enough to be in the ground, but it's too short to push to the ground, so I'm just going to have it be a little higher. So I can push this way farther down. That works. Have this come out. And again, for this, I can also eventually, I can just duplicate this one and like move it around and stuff if that's going to be easier to create more hair down here. But this works for now. Make this a little smaller. Close down. There we go. I just want a variation of hair that I can choose from to create these options. And then I can duplicate that and kind of move it around to radiate out from there. Yeah, VFX is super cool. I wish I knew more about it. I dabbled in it in school, obviously, because you kind of learn a little bit of everything at Gnomon, which is nice. But, you know, I primarily focused on modeling and texturing for characters. But now that I'm building and making my own game on the side, I have to get a little more familiar with some cool VFX stuff that I could do in something like Unity. So we'll see where that goes. But that's kind of the beauty of, you know, getting into 3D or 3D art in general. Is there's so many different disciplines that you can learn. You know, if you want to learn how to make smoke and stuff, you can. If you want to sculpt an orangutan, you can. If you want to animate one, you could do that too. And all of it's really awesome artistry. And, you know, it's how we make our coolest games or our favorite films. And be inspired by that stuff is by a bunch of collaborative people coming together and you know, being multidisciplined and sharing that discipline, sharing that artistry, and then you get something really cool out of it. And that's the part of being in the industry that's so fun. Is like being part of that team and being part of that collaborative. It goes a really, really long way. Surround yourself with inspiring people and you'll never get bored of what you do. Yeah, he Scrolls is saying he's fell in love with VFX after graduating. Tons of people find kind of their passion even after school. I had a friend who thought she wanted to be a modeler texture, and then she got hired as a lighting artist because she could do some lighting. And then over time, she was like, I think I like this way more, and this is super fun. And now she's a lighting artist. She works over at Insomniac. She worked over at Disney for a little bit as a lighting artist as well. And now she's over at Insomniac Games. So yeah, people find their passions. If I could go back, I think I'd want to take more animation classes. I'm not great at animating, but I have a huge passion for just animation in general, and I want to do it more. Whether it's 2D or 3D. In my game for the game that I'm making, I get to animate and I learn a lot. But man, I'm not that great at it yet. I'll get there, but maybe I'll go back and take some animation courses at Gnomon to freshen up my skills. That'd probably be kind of a good idea. But I'm animating in Blender, and it's been pretty fun. I like it a lot. I also want to practice 2D animation more, but that's the thing is, I mean, can't do it all. It's hard to be able to do it all. But there's so much cool stuff that we get to play with in our industry to make stuff come to life. I've always been a real big fan of animation because that's where, like this is a sculpt and it'll just stay in this pose. And that's cool. You can tell a really cool story that way and engage audience and artists and stuff. But man, there's something about when it starts to move, that's when stuff really comes to life. And that's where my passion lies a lot. It's where a lot of my inspiration comes from with, I love 2D animation. I love watching cartoons and anime and, animated shows or film. Just a lot of character and all that. So. Yeah, keeping art passion is important, and finding what drives you is really, really important too. If you do it for yourself or you do it along for others, that's great. That's why I like streaming for you guys. This is something that I do on my free time. I'd be doing this anyway, but I get to share it with you guys. And a lot of my passion about art comes from being able to share art. Not in a way of like, look at it, it's awesome, but in a way of just, opening people's eyes to, what's out there and the possibilities. And if I can inspire you guys to get out there and sculpt, then I feel like I've done my part as a artist in our community. And I think that's always really fun and cool. And I love seeing the feedback. Someone tagged me the other day that they were like, oh, I drew an orangutan while watching my stream. And I was like, oh, it's so cool. Like, I love that. If you guys are drawing or sculpting or doing whatever while you're, watching me work as well, then mission accomplished. It makes me very happy. So. Let me pull this up and I can pull this down. I want to feel like it's kind of overlapping on that knee. Yeah, animating is the most rewarding thing. Plus music, oh man, music makes everything better. I love the videos of music on stuff that it's not supposed to be on film, and it totally changes the mood of the film piece, and it's really fun. It's cool to just see how powerful music can be and emoting and all that stuff. It's very cool. Yeah, when it all comes together, that's why I love working in games, because, I get to make, I sculpt my Xenomorph and I model it and I go through all this stuff, but then watching someone take it and, put VFX on it, they make it slimy or put acid on it, and then there's sound, so they make someone, will make it hiss and whatnot, and then someone makes it move. Super cool. I love that someone can take what I do and make it come to life. That's a super, super rewarding process for me. Animating is therapy, yeah. Art is therapy. All art is therapy. I don't know, man. I don't know how people who don't be creative in some way, I don't know what they do. I'd go crazy if I couldn't do stuff. I think creating is part of kind of what makes us human. We're gonna get really into it. We're gonna talk real art today. Let me check messages. Oops. 1 second. Coffee break. But yeah, I love being able to share stories, and art is therapy, and I love being able to share that with people. I just brought a new 3D printer, and the whole reason I bought it is because I'm starting a D&D campaign with friends, and I'm going to draw everybody's characters, and I'm going to sculpt them, I'm going to print them out, I'm going to give it to them. It's going to be awesome. Because I just don't think a lot of people get stuff like that, and I think it's super cool to be able to, bring somebody's character and imagination to life, and make the game more fun. So that's all I want to do, is I just want to make it more fun and engaging for people to use their imaginations. Especially, all my friends, they're not artists. They just, get to be creative while we make D&D stuff. But if I can sculpt little goblins to put on our tabletop, for our custom games, then that'll be super fun. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to try to start getting into painting them maybe too. So we'll see how that goes. Too many things. I hope you guys watching me place this fur has been fun. Trying to keep the conversations interesting. Oh, CJMs is asking, have I ever tried using a space mouse with ZBrush? I find it really helps in ZBrush and Maya and Cinema 4D, so there's Painter. So it's funny you actually brought that up, because my one of my students brought in a space mouse, and he was like, yo, try this out. And so I played with it. It's super weird, and it's definitely a learning curve, but I could see the use in it. It's really fun. If you get used to navigating in 3D that way, I could see how you would never want to go back. But for me, for sculpting, it's kind of weird to navigate with one thing and then sculpt with my hand and then go back to the keyboard for shortcuts. So I think for certain things, it might feel more disconnected than I maybe want, but I don't know. I haven't done it enough to be able to tell, so. I could see it being very addicting, though. Because then it feels like you're just playing a game. Want this to be longer. Yep. Oh, that was weird. Okay. Oops. There we go. Hope you guys are having fun watching me place all these. I'm actually enjoying it. It's kind of therapeutic at some point. You just kind of fall into this little groove. You know, put some good music on. I'm good to go. No worries. That's probably enough. Yeah, I think that's fine. And so one thing that this is, oops, let's save it for one thing. Right, guys? Save your work. Save time, everyone. Okay. So now this is something that I can go in here. I'll auto group it, and then I can grab, you know, like this guy, and I'll duplicate it, and then I can rotate it a little bit. I can move that around, move it, rotate it a little bit more, move it, rotate it, maybe scale it out. And that's just a matter of grabbing the right one and kind of playing with this. And then I'll probably take this sculpt and I'll squish this back because I don't really need this now. Yeah, it's just there to add more volume. We're listening to non-royalty free jams. Yeah, we are. We are right now, fam, I'll tell you. I know, if we could listen to, dude, if I could, I would put on Jungle Book right now and just be rocking out to King Louie, but I like listening to music that, you know, puts you in the right mood. I sculpted a fish diving shark kind of character not that long ago, and I put on, I mean, I've been listening to them for a while, but it inspired me was I was listening to sea shanties, and it's awesome. Highly recommend it. Super fun. They're meant to motivate you to like work, so that's kind of like why they would sing them, right? Is they like raise spirits and, you know, while you're out on sea and all that stuff. So it works pretty well even if you're sitting at your computer. But yeah, listen to sea shanties is a fun one. But if you're, you know, if you're sculpting like a pirate, you're gonna have a good time. You know, I mean, maybe even listening to like jungle noises or something would be interesting. I don't think we need to do, you know, the back side of this because you just can't even, I mean, back here you can't even see it. So I think we're good. We don't need to do the two sides like we did here. Sea shanties. But now what we can do is, you know, to start overlapping this stuff, I can go back to my snake hook brush and start pulling out. These little guys. And this is a good way to just blend between everything. So I'm blending between, you know, three things. I'm blending between the fur that's sculpted, the curved tubes, and then the actual anatomical sculpt, right? That's on top of all of that. Or the below all of that as well. So a lot of parts here. Checking to see if my dogs are behind me, and they're not, so they're probably causing trouble somewhere. You know, I can start making these a little longer, just pulling these down. Because you don't want, like, you know, short to super long. That doesn't really make a lot of sense, so. Yeah, now we can start to get something a little more organic. And don't be afraid of stuff like this. If you just dynamesh it and reuse the snake hook, just fix it immediately. this stage is all about just like getting in the right shapes first, and then, you know, you can mess with stuff later. But I'm not afraid to just pull stuff down and smooth it out and then sculpt into it. I just need the geometry to be there. And then once I poly paint all this together, it'll blend in pretty well. And if I was to like print this or something later, it would be pretty seamless. Oh yeah, Doggo Havoc. When you have 2 German Shepherd Husky mixes, havoc will ensue. They're actually really good. They're sweet little angels, actually. But they are getting antsy because we haven't gone for our walks today. You can choose to keep, there's areas of rest versus the busyness. So at some point, there's just no point in sculpting fur on stuff. You just kind of smooth that out and just let it kind of be. I don't have enough clay there to work with. But you can kind of just pull that stuff down. If I took this now and picked it to be that color and filled that, it'll be a pretty seamless transition, especially once you start subdividing, then sculpting on top of this as well, and adding little extra detail. Be just fine. I'll do the same thing over here now. Oops. Start pulling all this stuff out. Oh boy, somebody downloaded Blender. Or ZBrush. Let's go. Yeah, ZBrush is a lot of fun. If you want a simplified version of ZBrush, to keep it not so scary at first, if it seems too confusing, you can use ZBrush Core. And ZBrush Core is a little bit more of a friendly version of the full-on program of ZBrush, but it has all the sculpting basics, to have fun with at first. So yeah, you can play with that to begin with. If this seems it's a little too complicated, it's also a little cheaper too to use ZBrush Core. So pull out all this hair. I'm just pulling it straight and then I'll pull it down. And then I can use the move brush to, I'm basically pulling and then I'm kind of warping it out to get the curvature that I want. And that just adds a lot of volume to the sculpt, and then you can start to kind of break up where you're pulling it. If I use the Damien standard and kind of like pull in and out of that fur brush, and then if I go in on top of this sculpt, the anatomical sculpt, and start kind of just sculpting in little stuff, you can blend stuff pretty easily. And have it look pretty good. So I can sculpt maybe this back down a little bit. pick this and... Yeah, it's kind of a combination of a lot of different techniques to get this looking a certain way and feeling a certain way. At least for just sculpting a maquette, you know, obviously it's different for every workflow that you do. I'm just gonna pull out random little ones here. Maybe to see if I can find a... He has like a little bit of a shaggy hairdo or something. We'll see if I like it, but just pull some hair down. You can see his beard is also a combination. If I get closer, it kind of falls apart a little bit, but you can see that it's a sculpt with little lines, and then when I add subdivisions to it, I can sculpt on top of all that. And same thing with this, has one main volume, and that it has multiple duplicates to get some, you know, straying, and same thing with the eyebrows and stuff as well. So oh, there's a puppy. Hello. She's like, I don't care about pets. I want walk. I feel like that's a good blocking for now. So I think what I'll do is I can start working a bit on the clothes to crumple. I want to crumple them up so that way they look like they're hitting the floor, and kind of get that blocked in and see how that looks. And that'll be the goal for today. Depending on how I get, I might have to wrap up early so I can take them and do some stuff since I'm by myself today. Depending on how antsy my dogs get, but should be fine. Also, my shoulders are starting to get a little sore. Still getting used to sometimes working full days on this tablet. I'll get there though. I could also poly paint these colors and stuff later, but I don't want to subdivide this yet until I feel like I have the full initial block out. I can start with maybe not this guy first. Let's start with this first. So there's a little cloth here that's just kind of going in through his stuff, but I want to pull it up so that way it feels like it's sitting on his legs. Whoa, don't do that. So I can use this move tool. Also, I should probably split these off now because they're gonna be very differently manipulated. So I'm gonna auto group this and split this off. Here we go. And I'm gonna move this way up here. So I'm gonna pinch all this stuff. It'd actually probably be a good idea also to, I like where it sits at the top, right? So I'm gonna mask that. So that way I'm only manipulating the bottom part. So I can move this up. I'm trying to get as close as I can to basically squishing, because I want to keep this topology together and squish it like as if it's going over his leg here. And then I'm gonna do the same for, I think for this, I think I'm just gonna have it come in the front and kind of drape down. Oh my god, what? Hi. Hi, dogs. Hello. You're being crazy now. So I'm just going to pull this up. There we go. Now I have something that's kind of following the contours a little better of the pants, and there's no crashing. If I turn on double, that can also help. Oh, hold on. Do you have something? Can I have that? Thank you. Coffee break. They are so... Can you see them behind me and how impatient they are? They're just staring at me like, can we walk now? Oh, thank you, Sasato. Remember to save. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Thank you. I'm going to save again. That one felt a little weird. Let me do that again. There we go. Double save. Shout out to you, man. Helping me out. Cool. And then this one, gonna do the same thing. I'll mask the top here. And then I'll move this around. That around. Now this is pushed a little farther, so that way I'm gonna push it up, so that way it hits the floor. And I can move up this stuff too if I feel like wherever the cloth lands, I can always push up the fur easier than I can the cloth. So I'll let that kind of dictate. Oops. Whoa, where are you going? What's happened? Oh man, that's weird. Why did that happen? Oh no, no, go forward. Don't mess up. Oh my goodness, get back over there. That's so weird. I did move this using transpose, so it did some weird things there. Fenders. Sorry guys about my dogs. Hey. Shh. No. She sees something outside. Sorry if that was loud for some of you guys. So it's just a Z history thing that you have to. Oh man, it did everything. That's so obnoxious. Yeah, it's just a history thing. Why are you like this, ZBrush? Bring that back down. Are you gonna be mean to me now, ZBrush? Let's save this again. All right. Now I have that. I'm gonna go ahead and hide everything I don't need. So I don't need to see the fur sculpts that we just did, and I don't need to see the inside of the fur right now. I just kind of want to see the bare minimum. We're kind of where we started, by the way. So fur adds a lot. So I can grab this guy here. And I can go to my dynamics. I can have floor collision on, and then I can have it collide with anything that's near here. I probably won't have it collide with the belt just because it will get in the way. So anything you don't want to get in the way, just hide it, because then it just makes the collision more complicated. And I can calculate a collision volume. So it did. And the inflate is how close it is to that collision volume. Depending on the scale of your object, it will change. So You just have to leave it at 1 and test it. Usually it's too high. But I can start to subdivide this, and I can change the firmness to like 4. I can move this around and see what happens. And you're like, ooh, that's not good. So maybe instead of it colliding with I can probably turn off the pants. I can recalculate it and see where that gives us. It might crash a little bit too much outside of there. So if it does something like that, you can also just hide the thing that it's freaking out about. It's not technically needing to collide with this. Also make it lower res, and that might help it a little bit. Let's see if that helps. Now we have that. Recalculate. And we'll use the nudge. That's better. You can also, if it's doing weird stuff like that, you can mask the area that you feel like you don't need. So if this is acting funky, I can move this also. But anything that's going to be in between this area, it's just not going to really like for no matter what you do. You can try to push that out as much as you can, but then you can also just mask it. So if I go up here and I try to mask this area a little bit, and then I go to my nudge, and I nudge that stuff around, it'll kind of help with that. I think the collision volume is a little too much because you can see how thick that gets, so you can lower that and it will recalculate. Well, that's better. Now I can go to cloth move and I can move this up. I'm going to try to create some bunching, like as if it's sitting on the floor. I'll go back and forth between cloth nudging and moving. Oh, it's masked, that's why. I'm gonna add another subdivision, and then I can nudge this again. And again, if you don't want the top to move, you can go down to the lowest. You can kind of mask that and go up to the highest. And now I can nudge this down and try to create some more interesting cloth folds. The more you change the firmness, the more folds you'll get in here. So again, I just want to get something that feels like it's sitting on the ground. And then I can sculpt on top of that later. I just want to get a basic idea. Like that's pretty nice. I like that this fold's nice here. I like this overlap. Nudge that around. We get some folds into here to make it feel like it should be pinching. In reality, the better way to do this is to actually pull this out, subdivide it, and then now you have more geometry to work with, so then you can nudge it in, and now you'll get actual folds in there, like as if it's pushing. You need something kind of close, so that way you don't get that weird overlapping that we were getting before. Maybe something like that. And then again, this isn't perfect. ZBrush's dynamics are okay. They're not fantastic. You know, in reality, for something like this, I would definitely be using like Marvelous Designer. For something very complicated too, where there's a lot of compressing and stuff, it's just easier to use something like Marvelous. But this gets the job done and gets close enough, and then we can kind of edit it from there. So now I can do the same in the back. Add some subdivisions. I can recalculate that volume. And that's the top here. And try to move that out. Get to kind of fan out a bit. Just want a little bit of idea of something. And if I was to put like a square thing on this, you know, like a flat plane, it'd be easier to then eventually kind of measure it, which is probably how we'll end the sculpt, is we can put them on an actual ground plane, and then it'll be easier to make sure that everything kind of sits solidly. Right now, this is kind of also just a little bit of, it's more guesswork than it is like real actual stuff. So do the same thing here, and calculate that. I'm not gonna do a whole lot here. I just want to nudge a little bit. I want to get some, these are really fine folds. Am I going the wrong way? No. Nah, firmness should be. I shouldn't be getting super small folds with the firmness at 5. I should be getting like pretty big folds. Yeah, I don't know why I'm getting this really fine fold. It's super weird. Because this way it seems to be actually, like on this side, it seems to be working fine, but then... Is it because I'm using move and not nudge? Maybe that's why. Maybe even firmness of 6. Might have to do with also the scale of this. But I'm just kind of wiggling this around to get some happy accidents. That's really all I'm looking for. It's just happy accidents. These are just ideas, just to get something. And then, of course, I can go in here with the move and refine this more, and then be able to sculpt on top of that. But that's fine. And then I can just smooth this out, and I can sculpt on top of this later. And then I think for, here we go, one last one, is I'm probably just gonna turn all of this off. My dogs are going bananas. What are you doing? Why are you being poop? Dogs are being buttholes. All right. I'm gonna try this. So I'm just going to subdivide this, and then go by dynamics. And I'm not gonna let it collide with anything. I just want to bunch up the bottom. So I'll mask the whole top here. I'll recalculate that. Oh, there's no collision. All right, I'll turn on one thing, turn on that, and do collision volume. And then I'll use that move tool, move. I'll see if I can get this to bunch up. Might start acting a little funky depending on might be a little too funky. I'm going to use a different collision volume because it's just going to collide too much with that. So I'll just turn on like the, let's see, where is his face? There we go. So it's just not colliding with anything. Just recalculate that. That's fine enough, and then I can probably warp it after that. Or I can, based on that knowledge, I can kind of squish this up this way. And I could just keep the green at the end of this, you know, to just get a basic idea. And then I'll do the same in the back. I'll just squish this up. For stuff like this, it's probably a good idea to start close-ish to where you want it, but oh well. I got a close enough idea. Okay. The front's a little messy, but I don't know if we'll be able to tell. Might be fine. The moment we start pulling this stuff out and when we add thickness and whatnot, oh, where's his foot? Where are you, foot? There it is. I don't need this Z-sphere. I made the knot through by using a Z-sphere, but I don't really need it anymore because the knot is fine. Have that feel like it's kind of laying there, and kind of move this guy around a little bit more. I'll have to sculpt more and more fold into it, but as long as it feels like it's bunching at his feet, then I'm kind of fine with it. I might have something where maybe it goes over his foot or something. I don't really know. We'll see. It's an idea. But I think for now, that's fine. I'm going to keep this part up here pretty stiff, and then we're going to add like a cool belt that goes around and add some more details and stuff, but I will save that for next time. Speaking of save it again. Okay, cool. Yay, we didn't lose work this time, guys. Isn't that great? So, yeah, so now we got some hair and fur blocked in, and then we've got his cloth stuff going. I think the back is obviously a little more successful than the front at the moment, but that's cool. We can just always play with it and sculpt. Again, these are just kind of starting points. Everything's a starting point because we always need that artist touch to make it look cool. But yeah, I think we got to a decent spot with all that stuff. We're going to add some more textures and all that stuff and finish it off to next week, because I believe it's the last week of the month for this guy, I think. That sounds right. I don't know, maybe we have two more weeks in this month, but technically they think this is episode 3. So so there you go. So now we've got our little maquette orangutan so far. We'll get into detailing the fur and like detailing more of his wrinkles and stuff and doing a more finalize poly paint and hopefully getting some more texture work in there as well for the finalized thing. Dan asked one last question, which is why I'm sculpting it. We're not doing X-Gen or hair. This is purely sculptural. So we're just sculpting hair today. It's not going to go outside of ZBrush. So that is that. Thank you guys all for watching and joining. Enjoy all the questions, and I enjoy everybody's company here. So again, thanks for joining. This is Archetype, sponsored by Lenovo and AMD. I am your host, Ashley. You can join us again next week on Tuesday. Check out Creature Corner as well. And I'll catch you guys next week as we wrap up this character. So with that, signing off. Good night. Have a good one. Bye.